What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I worked at a movie theater, and some customers were adamant that a staff member had stolen their wallet after they dropped it. Turns out that these people just couldn't see and found the wallet once they actually looked for it. They got irate with literally everyone, from the mall security to the managers to the staff. Mall security finally said get the freak out, and the customers went you can't say that. This isn't your theater, we are customers. Mall security guy promptly said this is my mall, and I can do whatever the freak I want. One of my jobs is in a hotel/restaurant/bar. A guest came into the bar after having been refused service at our sister hotel down the road. He was very drunk and had been rude, abusive and threatening to the staff. He insisted we serve him as he was a guest, but we'd already been phoned by our sister hotel, so they could let us know what the situation was. We refused, but offered him some water and suggested he go up to his room. He then went on about how he had nearly bought our hotel and that he was practically our boss, so we should serve him or he'd have us fired. We refused. He told us he was a very rich man and would tip us hundreds of pounds if we served him. We refused. He was getting abusive at this point, so we again suggested he have some water and head up to his room. He went on to tell us that his brother was the mayor, so we should serve him. We refused and told him he should go on up to his room yet again. He then said he was going to the pub across the street, but all the pubs/restaurants in our town have a barred from the mall policy. We telephoned the other pubs to inform them of the situation. Many of them got back to us and said they had been offered money, been threatened with losing their jobs, and also told the story of the mayor. All of the pubs stuck to their guns and refused to serve him. Eventually, he came back to the hotel and went to his room. When I was still a child, I saw how abusive my grandparents were to my parents when they used to stay in their house during their early years of marriage. When they were broke, they are forced to accept the abuse and swallow their pride, knowing that they are still indebted to them and had nowhere to go. Once they have enough money to leave my grandparents, they moved to a small rented house. My grandparents came for an unannounced visit and berate my dad for living in such a shanty house and how ungrateful he was for leaving their home. My dad was silent until they start blaming my mother for being a wife that brought bad luck to my dad and how she poisons him into moving to a new home. My dad weren't having any of their bile anymore and kicked them out. They stopped talking until my grandfather was dying of leukemia. My mom was the one who persuaded my dad to see him before he passed. My job right before my current one, property manager, the owner was an absolute prick. He was heartless and rude and racist, and I loathed him. I hated every day going into that job, but I needed the money. I was applying daily to my dream company in hopes that eventually I'd be accepted. In the meantime, every time I complained or mentioned something to my supervisor, I was told to shut up and get on with it. He was paying me too much to have opinions. 3 years after, we were a small office and the receptionist and assistant prop managers had quit. I finally got accepted into my dream company and happily put in my 2-week notice. In desperation, he offered me more money, a higher position, better benefits, which were laughable. When I said no, he asked why. I have never felt more gleeful than the moment of when I said I don't know. I'm not paid to have opinions here. That was a year ago, and even now the look on his stupid old face gives me joy to this day. I worked at a grocery store for 5 years, putting up with crazy customers and their awful attitudes. At the end of my tenure, our store was set to be closed, and for the last month the store was sold to a liquidation company, meaning we were no longer under our parent company's umbrella and were no longer concerned with retaining customer loyalty. I got to tell customers no and respond with every bit of sarcasm and disdain to every Karen I encountered for 1 month until the store officially closed. We had an HR lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse just spits out, "Oh, these other warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over, and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him. We knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as hell. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I check their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request, see who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. A co-worker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas, and he was able to upgrade to a first class seat. We had this bitch sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant McMansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got that seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally he tells her she has to go back to her seat or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first class cabin. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet, and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there, and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing, putting a dish on his house. I'll let him know that I pay the mortgage now, and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants, which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him, and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the freak he was doing here. He started in on me again, and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the all hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. Had an old boss who was a complete and total bastard. He was actually my boss and wasn't supposed to interact with us unless it was through our boss, but he just loved trying to make everyone under him squirm. The company had forced him to go to training twice because of how he spoke to people. One day, I get a call at home from him, and he just starts unloading cursing, name calling, insulting over some technical issue he just found out about. After a couple of minutes, I just looked at my phone and hung up on him. The next day, I get called into a meeting with his boss, who basically wants to know who the fuck I think I'm hanging up on this guy. I calmly explain that no one gets to yell at me on my time, in my home, on my phone. You have to wait for me to be on the clock to pay me for that privilege, and I'll gladly take that money if I'm busy being yelled at. I'm not busy with anything else. Seemed to work. I was working as a consultant for a company. There was a bit of a competition between me and this guy. Company starts to have some financial issues, so I leave and start working for a client of theirs. Shortly after joining they bring in this guy I was competing with at my old job. He was technically my equal, except now I was employed by the client and he was just a consultant. He was trying to one-up me during meetings and my boss told him that decisions are made by the company, not the consultants. It felt good.